This is Test Case Scenario with me, your host, Jason Baum. This podcast is the definitive hub for knowledge and stories in the software testing and development communities. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button and let's dive straight into the episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Test Case Scenario. I'm one of your hosts, Jason Baum. Joining me as always again is Evelyn Coleman. Evelyn.
Hi everyone.
It's always great to have you back on the podcast, Evelyn. And we have a special guest today. Joining us today is Mac Clark, a solutions engineer with Sauce Labs. Mac, why don't you say a few words about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jason. My name is Mac Clark. I have a game called Fishing on the Fly on Steam. Been here with Sauce Labs for 3 years. Came on board with the Backtrace side, really to talk about how to make games better. We're going to probably hint on a little bit of the shift right technology behind that for the production side. Having experienced some of those inside of my own game and what I could do to make better as well. Before that, I actually was an early person doing full stack development in the fintech space. Actually one of the originals in that place as well. But thanks, Jason. I appreciate you having me on board today.
Yeah, absolutely. Really happy that you're here, especially to talk on this topic, which you were hinting at, which is shift right, sort of like error reporting, monitoring. And we talk a lot about shift left. I think that's like the buzzword these days and has been, right, since DevOps sort of started to come about. But now I feel like we're hearing more and more about shift right as a solution, testing in production and all that. And that was like a dirty word for a while, I think, testing in production. Now you're starting to hear more companies doing it, and that's their adopted style. One pretty big company that I won't name, I saw a lot of articles about them shifting to that. So why don't we just start right there? What exactly is shift right testing? And how is it different from the traditional shift left testing practice?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's even important to split the difference between those two, right?
Yeah.
If you're testing in production, that can mean using synthetic data and moving through your system. And that could be like negative functional tests where you're logging into a system and making sure it doesn't log the inappropriate person in. And then we also have what we have is like error, crash, and reporting, which is basically a solution. You can almost think of it like an insurance policy. So if you have something catastrophic happen in production, you have coverage for those events as well. Traditionally, when you look at the gaming space, games like were allowed to like get by without having a lot of, they can get by a lot of errors and a lot of bugs. And we've talked about it before, but some of these titles have really taken big hits when they've shipped like that. So they need this policy when they can't put enough development time up front to make sure once they're starting to experience something in production that they can get coverage on it and get visibility into it and solve it as quickly as possible. I have many thoughts on this as well, but the one piece that it delineates from is shifting left is right. That's before you're released. And then you're thinking about as many things that you can do ahead of time, like black box, functional, all those kind of testing. And then, you have regression once something's released and then the post-production part. It's a really interesting space, and I think it's really important. I continue to talk to people about how CrowdStrike, when I think of arming other QA folks with money or not money, but thoughts about how to keep themselves in a job, right? Because the first thing that gets cut is QA sometimes or cost. What was the cost of the CrowdStrike? It was $10 billion for one bug, right? That's kind of your high watermark sitting up there and saying, okay, well, where's your organization fall inside of that? And then you want to go back to your management and justify that. What was the damage to your brand? So what's the damage to your app? If your app slips between a 4 and 5 star rating, you go from 90% adoption to the 3-star to 50% adoption, twice as much money on marketing. So what I'm trying to get around here is there's a real return on investment and real justification. It's a win-win for quality software to be shipped as high as quality as possible from the get-go all the way to the end. It's a win for the consumer and it's a win for the brand and the business.
Yeah, totally. And I have an article that was published on devops.com called Shift Left is Dead, meaning shift left testing. And, I think there are a lot of things wrong with how shift left in general, but shift left testing has really been kind of adopted. I think in principle, there's a lot of things that make sense about it, but I think what companies are doing wrong is that they haven't brought the QA function in properly early enough in the process where they're active contributors to the creation of software. They're still seen as the testers. And when you have that separation, I think inherently shift left isn't really happening. And shift right, there are issues there too. What I think is important, though, isn't shift left, isn't shift right. It's kind of this continuous testing throughout the entire SDLC process and emphasizing continuous quality. That is the thing that people should be talking about more and more. And I think we are hearing that more and more. But yeah, this is me more editorializing.
It's okay. I think I agree with you, Jason, that, we're supposed to test all through the life cycle. I think where this comes from is this idea that some folks are taking shift to mean cut.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going right or we're going left. And so we're going to cut the opposite. And I like to think of it more as sort of a bubble. Like if you've ever seen those models of the moon's effect on the tides, and you realize that it's just a bubble of the water flowing in one direction, but there's still water all the way around the earth, even when the tide shifts, right? So it's more of your bubble of emphasis for maybe just the time being. Maybe you're shifting that bubble because you realize you have a gap. Maybe you're not doing any kind of monitoring in production. So you're going to temporarily shift to cover the gap. Maybe you're shifting holistically and you're saying our product, whatever type it is, it's going to be more conducive to do more on the right or more on the left. But I don't think it means that we're cutting, or it shouldn't. I don't think people should interpret it that way, because then we get into trouble.
Yeah, 100% agree.
And I think that's why I'm trying to set this bar down, right? And say, hey, quality has a number. It's an investment. And, we need to arm people in our industry about that. So when we talk about this high watermark, 10 billion for one bug, and where your organization falls today. And it's not meant to cut. It's meant to increase the visibility for your investment. I kind of think of it like a flashlight. Like, okay, here's all my different types of testing, even on the shift left, right? You have functional or sanity or these type of things. And then you're moving to, this continuous quality platform. That's basically taking the flashlight and trying to get as many places that you have darkness and lack visibility to prevent these bugs from shipping in the quality, in quality software, prevent that experience that the user that breaks them fundamentally, right? Like crashes and hangs are horrible. Any place that you can drive or squeeze that from, whether it's left or right or smack in the middle, all of that continuous quality is extremely important to have that flashlight to shine in all of these areas so you get that coverage.
I have a question on that. And I love your analogy with the flashlight. Given the current economic state, given the resources, do you think from a gaming perspective, you would use that flashlight to uncover those dark spots closer to shifting right? Is that kind of what you're positing, or do you think it's case by case?
All of the industries kind of have a common theme, but I do think gaming is more of a unique use case. And Jason, and we talked about this, the toxicity in gaming, and kind of is hand to hand. Shifting left for the gaming industry means you want to prevent the developer crash that happens when you do your alpha and beta releases. Because once you start throwing players at something, they don't have enough QA departments to QA it or whatever. So they use players to do that. And that causes a crunch in the developer timeframe. And for me, shifting left in the gaming industry is using AI agents to play your games and not the players. And then using our product like Backtrace, that's traditionally shift right, but now you can use it to shift left because you have AI agents and these bots going out and playing these games. The bots used to be fight bots. They used to be fly bots. They used to be, a particular type of thing in the game. Today, with the progress that we've seen with machine learning and AI, we are working with a couple of these companies. I'm not going to mention them, but the point here being, they have everything bots now. These bots will learn the entire game and play your entire game for you. And in essence, shifting that left to get rid of all of that developer crunch in alpha and beta. So it's kind of unique in terms of that, Evelyn, but I think hopefully that answered the question or do you want me to keep?
No, no, it did, but it also raised this incredible idea of me being able to hire a bot for when I get stuck in my games and I don't have anybody in the house to get me past something. I would like these bots for hire as well as for shifting
Well,
left.
it will get you banned for most video games.
Bot, find me the warp zones in Super Mario Brothers 1.
So I play Apex Legends, used to play competitively. I have about 150 wins. Now I'm just humble bragging. So that was when I had more time. And but we'd have people come in that played the bots. And what you'll see is they'll walk down the screen and they'll just go like this, and they're shooting somebody over here in one frame and they're dead.
Yeah, for people like me who play in story mode, if I get stuck, I'm really already on the floor. Like I need like a skip button or something. But yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that because it's just making my day to think about these bots running around.
But they do make controllers where the mods to do these things are built into the controllers. It happened to be that video games tended to use a headbutt, like they use a bone system for their animations. So headshots are about knowing the bone system of the majority of the people all named it according to those frameworks for those video games. That's built into the controller. So if you were playing first in story mode, you could use a modded controller to automatically get headshots in an FPS game as an example of how that technology works.
Cool. And that's Ruined Gaming here with Matt Clark. Join us next time when we ruin your favorite cartoon when you were a kid.
I mean, it's gotten more advanced. I mean, today there are people that set up whole servers to try to get around anti-cheat systems, and cheating in gaming is a huge deal. And they even have ranked players that have gotten caught in tournaments doing it. It's pretty bad. I chose to have a nice game about fishing with no guns and really, there's butterflies in my game. I enjoy those games to some extent, but I do think there's a level of toxicity in them that I didn't want to engage in some of that. And I certainly don't want to play with players that are cheating. It's not any fun for anybody.
Does the type of game inform you did say like certain types of games you can use bots in shift left. If that's not something that's possible, is then that when you shift right?
For gaming in particular, it's a kind of a new concept to shift left. And I would say that it's more dealing with the engines themselves. Unity and Unreal are the two predominant engines. I know GoDot might have been mad about that or whatever he says, but they are the two predominant engines. And the technology around AI agents for both of them to play these games is really more dependent on that engine than to say that it is per title. And here, even at Sauce Labs, it's the same way we look at it. We're looking at it for the platform of what we can do inside of these engines for testing. We have a couple solutions in both of these places for automated testing for games. And that gets you more to that shift left place. When it comes to shift right for gaming, it is always relied on a player base to push the crashes and errors into production, and then you're reactive. I think if you were to go to a therapist or anybody like that, they would say being reactive to any situation is kind of a bad thing. You want to try to be proactive and, take that into a different consideration. So if it was me and I was in a director of engineering or quality at a gaming studio, I would be utilizing a full disposal of these tools with the goal of shipping the highest quality software so that I keep the players happy for all. I don't have to spend this money on marketing. I don't have to do these things on that level. And really that's about that idea of, again, continuous quality. What can I do to shift left? And how can I do these things once something does escape? One really cool thing about Backtrace is we have automatic Slack and automatic integrations to notification systems. And so you can send an email, you can send a page. So let's say you have a crash and that's horrible, right? And suddenly you have like 100,000 in the day of launch. You can literally have your entire engineering department aware of it the moment it happens, at the threshold it happens, and be working to address the problem and being it fixed as fast as possible. So it's really about cutting down the mean time to detecting it and then how long it takes to resolve that issue. We want to compress that as quickly as possible so that we don't lose players and don't lose trust and don't lose brand identity or brand value, I guess, more.
If it's one thing that I have learned from Marcus Merrill, Titus Fortner, Diego Molina, Nikolai Avalokin, Matt Clark, it is that bugs are going to get out there, right? No matter how much you test, bugs are going to make it out into production. And sometimes what's even more important than testing is how fast you can roll back, right? And how fast you can catch that error and correct it. So tell us a little bit more about error monitoring, crash and error reporting, and its place with shift right.
You mentioned something really interesting, which I think a lot of people are adopting lately, which is feature flags, which is the ability for them in any software, not just games, to basically say, whoops, I rolled out this as a piece of this, and then I'm just going to flip a flag and we can update these builds. So that's really, really interesting.
And with feature flags, it's also how you're naming, right? The actual labels that you're giving, make sure that they're very specific.
Yeah, like I've built this new level and it has a new car that has wheels and I've just released it. But you know what? It turns out they're sinking into the sand, which happened in a real title and prevented people from doing that in a very popular title. If you simply had a feature flag to, remove that tire that you just rolled out, I mean, it can unfortunately be these blend animations. You miss one bone or one particular keyframe, and you have these unintended consequences throughout the game, running player experiences. So you want to be able to label those very specific and say, kill this particular feature flag. It can't just be rev version 101.6. It doesn't make sense to anybody. But as far as, what production and error monitoring look like, I think of it as like a sick patient, right? We literally call our solution as a triage section. So comes through the door, and for me, when I look at this, I wouldn't necessarily triage the thing that's interesting to look at, but the highest number, right? That thing that's the highest number, like say it happens 2 million times in one day, which happens. It could be like an ads not served rate, but the 100,000 crashes that your game's experiencing, absolutely destroying your player experience, is the one that I would filter to. So the things that I'm going to want insight to immediately are the highest user impact, your highest things that any app, anything you ship. Today, we spend more time on our devices. So this digital confidence, and we've talked about it, years past, but is key because we're using these. This is our experiences. So this is an insurance policy, basically, to basically get coverage into those areas that you otherwise wouldn't, and to fix those problems as quickly as possible. And to me, crashes, hangs, and error, like those are the most important ones that drastically break it. From there, the other key piece of what you want to do is you want to make the remediation of that as quickly as possible. So we have this debug. From there, you click the debug part of our tab and it launches into what a developer needs right at their fingertips, all to solve that issue as quickly as possible. The stack traces, the dump files, even potentially source code, breadcrumbs, attributes, every single thing that you could dream of that you want, the log files attached, screenshots, all in one place for you quickly just to go, yep. I need to prioritize, get on it. Here's my team. Let's go. I think that summarizes a bit. Was there a little bit other thing that you were interested in outside of as a piece of that? Because I could drill down into all kinds of different things, but
No, that's really what I wanted to cover. And then I guess a follow-up question when we always talk about why something is so great is, so what are the common challenges teams face when implementing error reporting in production? And then how would you overcome those?
it's interesting because it is a competitive space, right? There are other solutions out there. And this isn't just why, but I'll give you a common challenge. There was a video game. It was actually an AR app on a phone, and it was in downtown Tokyo. You could hold up your phone and you could see a Japanese anime character on the high-rise building doing things. And it was amazing. People loved it, but it was driving 200 to 300 million errors a month into the system because the ads, like I mentioned, the ads weren't being served. Like it was literally that popular and that key. If you're going to launch something, the last thing that you want to do is not be able to get visibility into it. And that deals with scalability. Games happen on a scale that is almost unimaginable from the time that it takes to create them. Like Assassin's Black Flag, I think, was 10,000 people working on it for 4 or 5 years. 50,000 man years go into a game. When talking about trying to make a game in real life by one person as a solo dev, and then you think about another game that has 50,000 man years in it, right? And so you could think about the scalability of players that are playing with 100 million players. The primary concept and value needs to be the ability to scale to that use case. And that's one of the reasons why Backtrace doesn't try to be like an analytics solution. It doesn't look pretty necessarily on the front end because it is fundamentally built to scale, unlike any of our competitors. And that really is kind of one of the delineations of what I would look for in a solution. And then after that ability to sort, to give me this sort of triage, hey, what are these important problems, and to give that an ability that people can understand. We have drop downs, we have a query window, we have a little quick link that you can send out to basically give people this option to get visibility into those things, regardless of their technical capabilities. And then we offer a SQL query window where you can create really complicated queries to test out ideas and edge cases.
Yeah. And I mean, you kind of touched on this, but like alert fatigue, right? I mean, that's kind of what you were talking about, but alert fatigue can cause problems unto itself, right? You ignore other issues because you're getting so many alerts. And sometimes those larger errors might be slipping through the cracks. And that's one that you got to look out for.
And testing just in general, it's an excellent point, which is noise. Sauce Labs wants to give you signals that you can action on. And the second use case would be what we call deduplication, which is that ability to take, an error that has happened 100 million times, raise it above the others and show you where it is at that 100 million mark. We don't take 100 million errors and show it to you in that thing. We deduplicate it to show it to you once and say, it's happened 100 million. Here's where it sits at the stack. We do sort by default to the number of occurrences. So that would be the highest occurrence. It would show up first at 100 million. But again, I would take the drop down and go to crash and hangs and take a real good look at those as well. Just in terms of the prioritize of what I would be trying to solve, let's say something that's having problematic issues in production, which is very, very common for gaming. This is games don't have the same bar, say, as banks from a regulatory perspective. And so, I think gaming tends to see a larger volume of errors.
We have a lot of like VP of engineering or director of engineering or QA who listen to the podcast. And what would you say to them? Budget, speed, these are all things that, they have to think about in addition to quality. And I think people feel like, at least from my understanding, and this is going kind of back to what I said in the beginning, it's shift left or it's shift right. And never the two shall meet, or should they meet? And, what would be your kind of argument to that individual? Why should I incorporate error monitoring into my continuous quality strategy? Like, why is it so important? And should I?
I'm not sure I would stick on the right or the left. I think Evelyn hit on it excellently. Like when you bubble up one or the other, it's problematic.
Yeah.
I think that you're just kind of swaying with the winds of like what's popular right now in the QA world. I think it's more about developing a sound strategy for your particular use case and from what you're seeing. And you want to basically have that level of coverage and confidence across the continuous quality. I don't really want to advocate for necessarily one or the other above each other. I do think they all have their purposes. What if I had to say something to an engineering manager? It would be create an effective strategy with what you have. Say you have budget cuts. What are we seeing? You're seeing a higher degree of automated testing on the left. Okay, great. That doesn't mean cut in particular places. It means increasing coverage with the technology that you have today to use. Because if you're looking at CrowdStrike, and I'm just going to hammer on it as this $10 billion cost of one bug, I know your organization has a cost of bugs too. You know what that cost of quality is. And are you paying for it up front, or are you going to be behind on it when it damages your brand reputation? So that's the justification that I would go to a manager with, and like, hey, I know we're going to continue to make in technology improvements. Here's what I suggest: automated testing on the left side. I suggest we get some coverage over here on the right side for almost think of it like an insurance policy. Here's what we can in a worst case scenario. Here's what we can in the best case scenario. Here's how we moved all the way through. And if it was me, I'd want to present this in the smartest way possible to have that continuous coverage with what I've been given as my resourcing.
It's an awesome answer.
That was a great answer. When we do talk about that resourcing, Matt, how would a leader in the QA space take into consideration sort of the individual skills of the developers and the QA folks at their disposal when making these types of decisions? Is that a variable in what you just said?
Yeah, I think it is, because each organization, luckily, and it's great, I have an exposure to let's call them $1 trillion companies for lack of word, right? And I walk into the room and like, let's say one has a diagram up in Seattle where guns are pointed at each other as that organizational philosophy. And the other one is like, 30% continuing chopping as their annual. So each organization has a special use case. And in each organization also treats their cost centers differently. So some organizations will say, we need to grow at all costs. And when they have bad lean years, they'll cut cost centers. Okay, when you cut cost centers, in QA is traditionally looked as a cost center, where do you go next? Right? And I think that's why it's a variable, and because the organizations have their own needs. And so you basically cut your nose off to spite your face in some ways. And so what does that mean? That means that from an economies of scale perspective, we're here to help. When you decide to hurt yourself and cut massive, potential manual QA processes or whatever, Sauce Labs can help stand in, the automated testing that I mentioned before, or work with you and bring these solutions front, or other people can as well. But I'm seeing a lot of really large organizations look at QA as cost centers, cutting manual testing out. Cool, let's replace it with automated testing, be smart, but come up with sound strategies across the board. You can look at bugs as risk. So let's mitigate risks. How do you do that smartly, right? And it's about not taking this bubble perspective, shining a flashlight, getting coverage in all the different corners. And then as a worst case, when it does happen, have something in production to protect yourself.
All right. We're going to do a quick lightning round. Keep answers super short. All right. What's the weirdest bug you've ever encountered in production? And CrowdStrike can't count.
No, I know. Evelyn, you're first.
I play a very popular video game about space travel. And the other day I was stuck outside of my spaceship.
All right, Mac, go.
This is going to date me, but MySpace had a bug that allowed people to add everybody else in MySpace because they had masked a language with another language, and people figured out how to concatenate strings. This to get to some of the people out there for programming and run that. And that's what brought down the whole platform. That's what destroyed MySpace.
One of my favorite bugs is in a video game where a guy went to catch a touchdown, and I'm pretty sure it was intercepted by the other team, but they were in the end zone and like ran it back, but to the same end zone. It's like this constant loop of just like no one was doing anything, and it was just like they were kind of like floating in space. That's always fun. That kind of stuff happens, right? And then they roll it back. Now it's too easy to flip the switch, right? Which is great. That's good. Yeah. Light mode or dark mode?
Light mode. All the way. I'm on dark mode ever.
All right. Light mode or dark mode?
Both.
Favorite snack while you're debugging?
Pizza? Because I love pizza.
Is that a snack? Sure. I guess pizza could be breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack.
Europeans hate Americans because we actually eat at our lunch desk. We're like, what are you doing? It's lunch. But no, I have leftover pizza sometimes.
There you go. What about you, Evelyn?
I don't debug, but I'm a peanut M&M's girly when it comes to focus time.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you so much, Mac, for being on the show. Really appreciate the time and knowledge as always. And you are always welcome to come back on this show. I feel like you are another panelist, consistent panelist, I would say, recurring panelist that we have. So I really appreciate your coming on.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the time to talk about some of these things. It's kind of fun in one way.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Evelyn.
Always.
And thank you, our listeners, for giving us what's most precious in this world, time, and for joining us on another episode of Test Case Scenario. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on Test Case Scenario. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'll make sure to respond to each and every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to keep in touch. If you missed our last episode, it's popping up on your screen right now. Go, click it. Until next time on Test Case Scenario.